Hey, what's up, Zwifters? Welcome back to No Breakaways, your source for all the Zwift racing tips and tricks. Really cool episode today with Pro Joel Carroll of the Finesse Wahoo team and amateur Brandon Peterson. First, we'll be breaking down Brandon's race on the Champs Elysees. The second, we'll break down Joel's race on the London Classic course, where there's some really cool team tactics going on. Let's get into it. What's going on, fellas?
Howdy. Yeah, thanks for having me, right?
Yeah, good to be here.
All right, so let's get into the introductions. First up, Brandon Peterson. He's 6 feet tall, 167 pounds, 35 years old, Cat A. He's on dirt. He's riding a Saris H2 with Asioma Duos. He is a digital product owner in financial services. I'm not quite sure what that is. Father of 2 boys, 5 and 3. He's married to Cat A Zwifter Val Peterson on the draft team. And his notable accomplishment is that one time he murdered a bunny while he was riding. Also, little known fact, when I was texting Brandon to get on the show, he goes, "Man, I just won a race. I wish you would have got that one." And I was like, "Hey, no worries." He goes, "I'm never on the podium." Since he told me that, he's been on the podium about 85% of the time. Our pro is Joe Carroll, 5'11", 165. He's 31 years old, Cat A. He's on the Finesse Wahoo team. In real life, we don't really like to talk about that, but he's on the Yeah team. Wahoo kicker and a Pioneer left. He is an engineer, and he apparently has too many state championships to count, so he said he has a few Texas state championships in road, XC, and XCM. Top 50 ranked Zwifter, and right now he's leading the Austin Driveway Series. He also asked me to put in that he can make pancakes extremely quickly, so I've invited him over to my house every Saturday morning so that I don't have to make breakfast for my kids anymore.
I'm in.
Great skill.
Awesome. Well, let's get right into the clips. All right, so our amateurs race, Brandon Peterson, he raced in the dirt Saturday chase race on the Champs Elysees. I know that I'm saying that wrong. Don't rip me apart, but it's what I got. Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit about what a chase race is, how you go into a chase race, and then walk us through the course.
Sure. Yeah, the chase race format on Zwift is one of my favorites. So the Saturday chase race is something I've been doing pretty frequently for probably about 2 years now, and it involves the categories starting at staggered times. So D's, C's, B's, and A's are the last to cross the start line. And it really requires sort of this balance of teamwork where each category is trying to catch the categories in front of them, but ultimately you want to win the race and the category as well. So it's definitely a unique blend of racing tactics in the chase race on Zwift, and it's one of my favorites to ride. This particular course here, but when I did ride it for the video we'll go through, it was actually just my second time racing it. But to me, it really comes down to this kind of small climb. Lap after lap, it continues to be kind of this war of attrition and who gets spit off the back on that climb. In particular, 2 other places that I'll just mention is kind of that at the end of the course, that round curve around the statue is always one that sort of hurts. You finish the top of this small climb, you just kind of hold on around that statue. And then on the other side of the course, there's just a real small little kicker coming out of a tunnel that's often like a punch of power when you're racing. So those are, to me, kind of the key features of this course.
Brandon, something else. So this race is at Saturday morning, 6 a.m. It's the Saturday chase race. You actually had a Zwift famous racer show up for the Saturday chase race at 6 a.m. on Saturday. Who showed up?
This is true. Yeah. So the night before, I usually take a look at who signed up for the race, and it was kind of the standard crew, right? No real surprises. A few other dirt guys. But then when I logged into the pens in the morning, national champion Holden Camo was in the pen. So second place started to seem like a more likely outcome as the best solution there, because first place seemed pretty wrapped up at that point.
Well, luckily, Joel told us before the show, I don't know if you caught this, Brandon, he said from now on, after he teaches you, you'll be able to beat Holden every single time. So no worries next time he shows up, right?
Guaranteed.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. I mean, we'll talk. I think his advice was pretty, and we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was some pretty simple advice. He said, look, you can get your sprint up to 20, 21, 22 watts per kilogram. You're going to be beating him every time. So For those of you who are watching, you can turn the show off right here. Just get that up to 22 watts per kilogram.
All
right.
It was fun to have him join us though in this race. It was pretty cool.
All right, so let's get right into the start. This is the start of the clip. Coming out of the pens, you take a right and turn and go around that square loop. All right, so here comes Brandon out of the start pens. Brandon, why don't you walk us through what's going on?
Sure. So we just, anybody who's done one or more Zwift races knows that the start is brutal, right? So I try to come out of the gate really quickly. This particular race, I was right up front. There's a couple things. I'm probably going a little hard here, but one of the things I like to do in the chase race is to start really fast in an effort to get the whole group to start really fast. If you think about what we're trying to accomplish, we're 10 minutes behind the D category who has started. So I want the perception to be that I'm going to work hard the whole time, and then I'm going to do my best to not have that actually come true later in the race.
I was going to say, I noticed that word perception. I really liked that.
That's the key, right? So so I started off pretty fast here. Yep.
So Brandon, I've not done too many of these chase races. I think I did one of the ZHR like Hare and Hounds ones once, but talk about what your goals are. It's kind of a team time trial, but you're also trying to win. Are you trying to only beat the other A's, or are you trying to also beat all the other categories as well?
Yeah, it's both. The first thing is you're trying to catch and beat the other categories. So the worst thing that can happen at the end of a chase race is that your category, so in my case A, we don't make the catch, right? Because then it just kind of feels like, well, what were we doing out here? And then the second worst thing is that you get dropped somewhere along the way trying to make the catch. So, it's this kind of balance of you want to pull the team, but you really don't want to go too hard, because if somebody decides to make a break within the A category, you've got to be able to react. It's a little bit on a flat-ish course like this. It's obviously a little bit easier for the pack to stay together. But that's why I was kind of saying, I just want to try to start fast, or at least look like I'm starting fast, so that people think I might do some work, and then try to avoid work at all costs once the race actually starts.
Yeah. In real life road races, I feel like when you establish at the beginning of a race that you're willing to do work, then people kind of take advantage of that. And they're like, okay, I'll just hang back and let these guys do everything. I think it's a little different in Zwift because you can ride through people and stuff like that. And so I don't know how many people are paying attention to other riders' names and their other positions and stuff. And in this race, it's especially tricky because you guys are all wearing the same kits in the A group, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so it's hard to
a bunch of
somebody.
hot pink out there. Yeah.
But as a sprinter, this is an ideal format for me, right? Because if everyone has that, or at least some of the people have that mentality of this team time trial that's happening, everyone's happy to pull you to the end. And they think, the more people we have and the more motors we have on our group, the faster that we'll be able to catch these other people. And so if you're a sprinter, you can just kind of sit in and hope that the other people do the work for you, right?
Yeah, totally. You see it every week. You'll have people that are saying we got to pull, we got to go. What it really comes down to is, a lot of times you'll have somebody kind of giving time checks in this chase race format. So you'll be able to judge, okay, we're halfway through the race. Have we made up any time on the B's, or have we made up, we have a 2-minute gap to the B's in this particular race. So have we made up a minute at this point? So it just starts to become this total mind game. And it's, it's like, how much do we need to try to pull versus are we going to make the catch? Is it easy? And now I want to sit back and wait to try to, get a sprint or something at the end. So yeah, it's fun. It's one of the reasons I like this format. It's just a little bit different than some of the others.
Here's some awesome advice about when to super tuck on this course.
So if your peloton isn't big enough and your pace isn't high enough, sometimes you can't quite get to that speed. But what you can do is if you kick it a little bit, then get your avatar just to that threshold, which I believe is 58 kilometers per hour, and then stop pedaling. You will aero tuck and you'll kind of stay in the peloton, and you might float to the front, and that will decrease your speed. But what I found is Zwift doesn't actually kick you out of the aero tuck for a decrease in speed. It only kicks you out of the aero tuck when the decline goes greater than -3, so -2 or whatever. That's when it kicks you out of the aero tuck.
All right, next up we have this little hill. One of the features we talked about at the start, kind of one of the defining features of this course. I really want to go over how to approach it. So let's go to the clip, and we'll have Joel walk us through. Here we go. Why don't you take us through, Joel?
Sure. So this downhill here, even though it's really steep, you're probably not going to be able to get to the appropriate speeds in order to super tuck. So really your goal here is just to pay attention to any splits that might be occurring and make sure you're on the right side of those. And for me, I like to be more towards the front of a blob on like a punchy hill or even a longer hill, just so you don't get stuck behind somebody's draft that may be getting dropped, because it'll take a little extra energy to kick around them and reconnect with the peloton. So, I mean, the way you play it here is perfectly fine. I think you do need to kick a little harder as you come up this hill. Then, it's not really like something that you can just steady state through. You do have to put out a little more energy to stay with the pack here, usually because the pack is surging as well. But yeah, I'm totally fine with the way you played this hill.
So something I thought was interesting is if you look at the numbers over there on the left, you see people getting up to 7.5, 7.8, 8.0. And Brandon doesn't really go over 5. Maybe he gets to 5.1. So, I mean, you can draft up this hill, and it kind of does pull you up, which I thought is kind of interesting. I think some people go much too hard on here, like they're going to make a break, and it's just not a place you can make a break.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think I have seen people kind of sneak away there, especially because there's a turn right after the hill. So people that are not being very attentive to their mini map and are just looking at the blob itself, you're kind of blind if somebody does go off the front there. And I have seen people not very successfully get away for a short amount of time, right? But it is a kind of a tricky spot to attack, yeah.
All right, next up, the defining feature of the course, the big hill. This is where that war of attrition really happens. We're going to go through this race clip. We're going to have Brandon talk us through it, and we're going to have Joel talk a little bit about how he approaches this hill, what the goals are, and what we should be doing.
So yeah, this is the painful section of this course. It's interesting. Joel's mentioned a couple of times. I have Zwifted enough now that I've kind of reached a similar philosophy. I'm terrible on hills of any length, but I do know that I want to be towards the front. I don't want to be at the front, but I want to be able to be close enough to the front so that when I get to the top, I can try to take my time and breathe and kind of just hold some wheels, especially around the curve at the top of this course. So my plan going into this hill was, try to stay kind of second, third, fourth, kind of top 5 wheel, get some draft if I can, and really just kind of hold on lap after lap until I could try to last to the finish. So that's literally my philosophy here, is just try to hold on.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach. Yeah, I do the same thing. I mean, I'm not the strongest hill climber in the world either. So when you get to the top, it's nice you can take a little breath, but a lot of people will attack over the top, and so you still gotta hang on with, surfing those wheels a bit. But, fortunately we're like we're not big people, but we're big cyclists, we're kind of similar size. And so we have like more raw watts. And so that works to our advantage on the flat. So we may have to work a little harder on the hills. But yeah, as long as you can stay in the draft on the flat part at the top, then you're good to go.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the replay here. I don't even realize my max heart rate is like 184, 185. I mean, I'm redlining it up at the top here, just, staying with this group. And I maybe was, looking back here, maybe was going a little too hard. Like I'm right at the front at the top of this, but that way I know like I've made it to the top. I know I can hold on until that next downhill, one more lap, right? And so, yeah, that's just the philosophy for me.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys think this is a good place to attack right here through this arch and try to split off some of the group? I mean, we've talked a couple times about attacking around that circle. What do you both think?
I think that that's probably one of the only places you can attack on this circuit. You can't really do it on the flats, and that little punchy turn, usually you don't get enough people to come with you, and so you don't really have like a successful break kind of setup. But this is one of those places where you can attack on this hill and you can cause a serious split, and you can form a breakaway that way and bring a couple other people to help along with you. And yeah, it's tricky. You got to watch for that. I personally don't like to attack here because the hill hurts me, and I think it hurts you too, right? So, but the lighter weight climbers that can put an attack in on this hill and then still carry that through the flat, Usually you'll catch them on the downhill if they didn't bring enough people with them. It's kind of where's the bigger pack, where are the more motors, and that's generally where you want to be overall, especially on a course with a couple of downhills where the peloton can get back to a break pretty easily if it's not big enough.
All right, next up we have the finish. We're going to be coming down and up that little hill, taking a left, taking another left, and then taking a right, all the way up through here, and it's a bit of a blind finish, and this one is especially interesting. So I'm going to ask Brandon to walk us through what happens and how he counters what happens. All right, Brandon, walk us through what's going on.
So this was a really interesting finish. I had in my mind going into this finish and this rise here, I knew that if somebody was going to try to make a move and break away from the whole pack, I thought it would happen here, right? So we come up over this hill, and I'm trying to just stay with everybody. I also had a truck power up, so my goal was like just stay with the group as long as I can and watch for moves off the front and try to just hold some wheels to the finish, right? So didn't see a big move happen. Was trying to sit in. Again, was kind of looking for Holden, right? Because if I could hold anybody's wheel, I was trying to find him. And then what happens here is that Holden does make a huge move with Dave Shaffron, with Ghost off the front. I totally miss it, right? I mean, they are orange numbers taking off, and I don't even see them. Like in my screen here, I just didn't even notice them until they're a tiny dot way up in the distance. So, at that point, I know personally there's no way I'm going to bridge up to those guys. So I sit in with the rest of them here. Power ups start dropping. I kind of know that this is a little bit early. We still have, maybe half a mile or a little bit less here to go. So I'm just trying to stay with the front of this group until we come around this corner. And I know that's sort of the final straight to the finish. So a few guys start going. I start getting a little nervous. I drop this truck power up. I'm anticipating a big surge here from the group. Like I'm expecting 5-10 guys to go. And that never really happens. So I catch this guy. I'm in no man's land. And now I'm just holding on for dear life. Tim Busick comes up behind me here. He is a super strong B rider, and it's just like this drag race to the finish line. Another A rider blows by me here, but I was absolutely toast at the end of this. And I think I was pretty fortunate that not more riders caught me. I felt like I was a little bit stranded there, but I still ended up, Zwift Power has me third. That guy that passed me at the end there was missing a heart rate. So that worked out really well for me in the finished results. But yeah, that was the finish. It was kind of a wild one.
Mr. Third, Mr. Podium, Brandon Peterson, everybody.
Nice. Yeah, I think your analysis here is really good. I also was looking at the same thing as you were. I had to rewatch this clip a couple of times because you'll see after you crest this hill here, you'll see you're right next to Holden. And I was like, surely he's watching Holden, right? He's going to grab his wheel. And then Holden starts moving up a little bit, and then he disappears. You don't see him. And I had to watch it a couple of times because I didn't understand what was happening because I don't play with power-ups usually. Like I do one race a week and the power-ups are disabled in it. So, but yeah, so Holden like disappears kind of. You can still see him on the right side here, and then he's gone. He disappeared. So, but yeah, you said it right. You're not going to be you don't want to be the one to bridge to him. He already made the move. And honestly, the fact that he's still in the group with you guys are already like, you have to sprint against him. So if you didn't drop him earlier in the race, now you got to sprint against him. And he's already pulled a trump card on you, and you're not going to be able to close that gap on your own and win. So if you were in a team scenario where you had a couple other guys that were willing to work for you, ideally one of those guys would help bridge for you. But then, yeah, like you said, you did go a little bit early there. And I was also kind of surprised you didn't get overwhelmed and swarmed at the end there. But, maybe everyone's legs were just kind of soft from those repeated climbs up that hill. So, yeah, it worked out for you. But, it's using that draft power up like you did was really helpful when you did, getting into good position right at the back of that single file line like you are here. And then really punching it once you get to the front. At that point, your draft is not really helping too much. You need to blow by these guys at a high enough rate of speed to where they don't want to grab your wheel. So yeah, I think you did the best you could with what you were working with.
Yeah. Yeah, it's it was an interesting move when Holden and Dave dropped those ghosts there. I totally was not. I was expecting something over that hill or something later, and credit to those guys. They dropped it right at this. I've just never even saw them. They were gone. I'm not sure. Looking at their numbers, I could have hung with them anyway, but yeah, those guys put a great move in at the end.
So
Yeah,
Joel,
absolutely.
is there anything watching Brandon sprint that you think he should have done differently? When you see somebody go off the front like that, like I mean, if you could have seen him, like let's say somebody pops up like that with a ghost, I mean, do you just go at that point and hope, or are you just like,
No,
well, that's kind of the race, and you do what Brandon did?
yeah, I think that they had already won at that point, right? Like when they had the 3 second gap with like a half mile to go or whatever. Without teammates and everybody's like hunting for individual glory, the best move you can do is wait for somebody else to chase and then try to grab their wheel and get that free ride. And sometimes people are willing to do that. And if they are, that's a lucky race for you. Ride their wheel, beat them at the end. If no one is willing to do that, then you just kind of have to beat the other people that are in your pack with you in the final sprint. But yeah, I think the way that you got at the back of that single file line, you probably approached the front of that maybe a little too soon. You could have waited a little bit longer, conserved a little bit more energy, tried to keep that heart rate a little bit lower before really kicking it on. Seemed like it was a little far out, but I mean, it worked out for you. So, yeah, I don't know what your typical like peak power numbers are. Would you say that this was like a little lower or higher than what you normally do because of the high rate leading up to the sprint, or?
Yeah, it was definitely one of my higher, like 30-second numbers, because I did kind of start so early. So the 15-second number looked low, but 30-second was definitely higher because I just found myself kind of stranded out there. And when I overtook kind of the start of that line and I saw how far the banner was, I was like, this is not going to end well for me, but
Yeah,
somehow it worked out. I don't know.
yeah, I've been there. Yeah, I mean, honestly, the biggest difference separating me from you is just the sprint. Like, other than that, our numbers are almost identical, and it's you were joking about don't have my advice to you be a better sprinter, but I mean, it really helps. And Zwift is a sprinter's game. Like the
Mm-hmm.
most of the courses are sprint finishes. It's the way that you can ride through other riders, and the way the peloton just kind of sticks together. Breakaways are pretty rare, and it's going to come down to a sprint usually, and just having that trump card in your back pocket is half the game. So I think that when you're doing training rides or things like that, practice sprinting outdoors. It's sprinting is very much a what's it called, like a brain to muscle connection thing that you can train and develop, and it really doesn't have anything to do with your aerobic fitness, right? It's developing those neural pathways to be able to get your fast twitch muscle fibers to kick in when you want them to. And that's something you just have to train through, sprint workouts. And sprint workouts can be fun, right? You cruise around at 15 miles an hour, and then every 20 minutes you kick it up to 1,000 watts and like go hard for 15 seconds just to help develop those pathways. And when you're thinking about sprinting, it's like, what are you doing with your body? What are you doing with your legs? You really want to try to snap those crank arms off, right? That's what your goal is. It's a much different feeling than just like kind of increasing your effort a little bit. It's a full on, you're trying to snap those crank arms off. So it's different, but it's definitely something you can train. And I think it's easier to train outdoors personally, but.
Sounds
So do you
good.
find that your outdoor sprinting training really translates 1-to-1 to Zwift?
I mean, I think I can hit higher peak power numbers outdoors, and I think everybody really can, just because of the mechanics of sprinting. Where you can kind of get your upper body more involved, and you're kind of pulling on the handlebars to lever against your legs, essentially pushing down the other way. And so with the way most trainers are, where you're kind of more in a static position, you can still pull on the bike a little bit. And, in some of my streams, you can see like I'm really working my upper body and trying to like push and pull simultaneously with those things. And it's not something that I'm like consciously thinking about. This is my trainer, style of sprint or whatever. I'm trying to do my outdoor sprint, form on my sprinter, and it doesn't quite work the same, but you can still get some pretty good power. Maybe not as much as you could outdoors, but it's the same concepts.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, it's something I've been focused on for a while, knowing that it makes such a huge difference at the end of almost every Zwift race I do, because you're not going to see me sign up for a race up the Alp or something like that. That's not my cup of tea. But yeah, I mean, it takes time, right? And to your point, like, I'm trying to work on that, just like tearing the bike apart at the end of this race and not throwing up at the same time. It's kind of a unique balance that I find most of the time.
Yeah, Zwift, the all-arounder phenotype, it really has no place in Zwift, unfortunately. It's like you're not strong enough to get away in a break or to go solo, and then maybe you're not strong enough for like a sprint either at the end. And so it's kind of tricky, but you either want to be somebody with a really high threshold that can get away solo or in a break, or you want to be a sprinter, and there's not really a lot of in between.
Definitely a sprinter then.
Yeah. There's other ways, you can play to your strengths depending on your rider phenotype. If you're not necessarily a sprinter, but you have good 1 minute power, like a puncher or whatever they call it, like you can go from like 0.5 to 0.7 miles out. And a lot of times other people just kind of look at each other like, you going to chase this guy? You going to chase this guy? And everyone decides it's a little too far out to go. And so nobody chases you. So you got to watch for those attacks. But if that's something that you're strong at, that 1 minute power, that could be your sweet spot. You just have to be careful that when you do your attack, you're not pulling through slow so that somebody grabs on your wheel. You're going max effort from 0.7 out, establish that gap, and then ride hard to the end and hope nobody chases.
So now for our key takeaways. Number 1, take advantage of the downhills. Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we're talking about here?
I think we had some really good points from Joel about, how and when to super tuck and knowing the criteria to do so. And, really kind of comes down to like conserving as much energy as you can wherever you can. So this was sort of my first key takeaway, was just being able to take advantage of the downhills. They're really such a perfect opportunity to try and rest, which doesn't happen very often.
Awesome. Number 2, mark your rivals. Joel, you brought this one up. Tell us what you meant.
Yeah, so Brandon talked through it a couple of times where he was paying attention to where Holden was, both at the beginning of the race when Holden took his pulls, and then again towards the end of the sprint, which unfortunately he kind of ghosted there at the end, so it's a little hard to mark him. But just know where the people that you think are strong wheels are and follow those wheels. Make sure if they get in a break, you're there with them. When they start their sprint, you want to be right on them. And also, you want to do everything you can to make them hurt. If they take a pull, counter over the top of them, make them put in that extra work.
Awesome. And number 3, play to your strengths. Joel, can you take us through this one?
Yeah, I mean, ZwiftPower.com does a great job at displaying your 20-minute, 5-minute, 1 minute, 30-second, 15-second power, and so it gives you a really good idea of what your strengths are or what your rider phenotype is. Are you a time trialist? Are you a sprinter? Are you something in between? And time your attacks accordingly. So, if you're a sprinter, wait till at 0.2 or 1,000 feet or 200 meters. If you're more of a time trialist, your goal is to establish a break. So you really have to play to your strengths. And unfortunately, Zwift mechanics make it such that most of these end in a sprint. So just being a strong sprinter is a huge advantage in Zwift. But
that's part 1 of our episode with Joel and Brandon. If you want to see part 2, click right up here for Joel's breakdown of his race on the London Classic course with some really cool team tactics. Please click like and subscribe below. I'll see you next time.